Welcome back to another episode of Keeping Tabs, where we're keeping it real about real estate. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the most important, sometimes stressful, sometimes confusing parts of the home buying and selling process, the inspection.
So today we have Andre from Win Inspections. Andre and I have done several transactions together. He's helped several of my clients find homes. And today I thought would be a great opportunity to ask him some questions and have him share some knowledge in the inspection category.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Zach. Great to be with you again. Tabitha, always a pleasure.
And Andre, how long have you been an inspector?
So I bought this franchise. It's a franchise I'm in about 5 years ago.
Okay. And you have done all sorts of inspections, all price points of houses. I know that you've helped me out on. Some houses have more issues than others. And we've been, Zach, we've been in a market where we've actually had and seen a lot of waived inspections. And it's been really nice to still have them and have offers accepted. And, I think the importance is finding agents that can help negotiate the ability to have an inspection and not always have to waive that, because for a lot of people, especially first-time home buyers, they don't know what they're walking into, and having a professional that can explain the importance of finding this home, what it's really going to cost to fix it if need be. So we go through all of that. And for sellers too, that's another thing. There's a lot of pre-home inspections that occur. I wish they occurred more than I've heard the West Coast does them, but that's also an opportunity for sellers to really get a jump start on problems that might come up. So I would say, so let's just dive down into what inspections we see in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania is the market that I work in. And I would say for the most part, we do regular home inspections. So can you explain a little bit about what is involved in a home inspection?
Sure. Thanks, Tabitha. Yeah, home inspection is interesting. It's a visual inspection of the property. So we're not really taking anything apart or digging down into anything. We're not pulling back carpet. I can look under a rug, but it's hard to look under a carpet. Not taking anything apart. So it's interesting that, just from a visual inspection of everything that we see, we can find if there's an underlying issue. And we'll go through everything. I usually start and go in the same order. I look at the exterior of the house, the exterior foundation, the grading, the roof, the siding, the doors, the driveway, walkways, pretty much anything from the outside, the fascia, the gutters, the soffits, etc. And then I work my way in. Well, I look at the roof too, and depending upon whether it's a roof that I can get on, and most of them I can't. And so I use a drone. I'm a licensed drone pilot, so I'm able to get into all the various corners and so on. And more lately, I've become more of a surgeon with the drone because of the trees that I have to deal with. So, but that's always fun. And then we go inside and I look everything from the top down, from the plumbing, the electrical, the staircases, the walls, and so on. Plumbing, HVAC systems, electrical, you name it. I go through all of it. We just go through everything. What Tabitha was saying also with the different types of inspections that we do, I also do, not beyond the home inspection, I do radon, I do termite. I can do a sewer lateral inspection. I can do a mold test, whether it's an air or surface test. And
so can you explain starting off with the home inspection, we go through the house, and then the buyer might have concerns about certain items and how you address those concerns as a home inspector and what your suggestions are to some of the things that you see come up regularly.
Sure. But before I answer that question, Tabitha, and Zach, you probably know, every single deal is unique. You've got the sellers, you've got the buyers, you have the two realtors involved. Often you have the house itself. And then you have to also look at what is the experience level of all of those people in buying a house and what they're looking to do. And so there are some clients, and Tabitha knows these clients, that they think they're buying a Swiss watch that is perfect and it's going to always be perfect. And the reality is that it's a house. Every time you walk out of your house in spring after the long winter, you realize that a lot of things have changed, and that keeps going on. There are other buyers that know that they're coming into a house and they're going to have to make updates, repairs, remodeling, refinishing things, and they're looking forward to that so that they can make the house their own. And so I end up having to navigate what is important to that client, what level of depth we're going to look at in various things, because, the house I just inspected on Saturday, they knew they were going to rip the kitchen out and remodel it. So they didn't really need me to go over it line by line, whether the dishwasher was going to be perfect and work for the next 5 years or whether the cabinets were going to be okay. Because in a month before they move in, they're going to change it out. So I really have to focus on listening and understanding the dynamic of my client, whether it's the buyer or the seller, so that they can make an informed decision. And that's really all I'm doing. I'm not trying to find fault with the house. I'm not trying to, if we see a reason not to buy the house, great, I've got to point that out. But I'm really trying to help the client to make an informed decision as to whether or not this is right for them. I don't coach them. I don't steer them. I don't say anything. It's all matter of fact. And the way I present it and myself, I don't scare anybody, because it's just a matter of fact of the state of the house and what's going on. So from my perspective, it's educational and it's eye-opening for them so that they know what they're getting into. I also find that, on a pre-listing inspection, it really helps to, should we say, grease the sale, because then it's full disclosure from the seller's perspective of everything that they've fixed, haven't fixed, what's broken, what the status is. And so then you create trust and transparency, which makes it a lot easier for buyers. Buyers are afraid. They're afraid of making a mistake. It's a pretty big deal to buy a house. So how do we reduce any of the fear or the friction is what I do.
And you do a good job on that. And I think, for us agents, it's really having the conversation with the clients and setting up the expectations. I think earlier on in my career as a new agent, it was harder to have those conversations. You wanted to help your buyer, and then your buyer gets a home inspection and they want everything. And it's really, maybe we didn't do the best job of, as the agent, explaining the purpose of a home inspection. And a lot of times people come to me now when I do the buyer, I've been in the industry longer now, and we'll do the buyer consult. And I discuss with them before even going out, what is a home inspection, what the purpose of a home inspection is. And what it's not is, it's not an opportunity to really try to get the seller under contract and then try to smash, the seller's the offering you give them. Let's walk through the house. Let's know that if we know that a heater is 40 years old and it's disclosed that it's 40 years old, and then Andre comes in and tells us it's 40 years old, but it's working, we can't really ask for a new heater because we put the offer knowing that it was 40 years old. Or if, now if we don't know the age of the heater and it's not working, then that's a different conversation. What we might ask for the heater to be serviced, and show a sign of that it's in good operational order. Or we might ask for a credit. And things like heat, things like water heater, things like air conditioning, if it has central air, roof. Obviously, we can't see a roof when we're not usually, but sometimes we can see a lot of signs of a roof, but usually we can't walking around. But, roof would be an important thing if we don't know. But, there are some clients out there, buyers, that want to take an inspection report and ask for everything. And if you're just, as the agent, if we're just frank up front and say, that's not what we're going to do here, that's not the purpose. Offer what you want on the house. That it's not the time to really get what you really wanted the house for and use the inspection for it. So offer what you want in the house, and then let's go through the list and see what's fair on both parts. And I think, working with other agents, if you come across, with good intentions and understanding and not just ask for silly things, then the other agent on the other side can relay that to their client and try to really come together with a meeting of the minds and make things happen. There's I've terminated several deals for home inspection reasons. There are some things that are above what a buyer can take on, so there are times you terminate a deal and that's okay. But I think the purpose of the inspection report is to really see what's wrong and what can be negotiated in a fair way for both parties.
Silly things, I try to out people, and I know we've had this conversation. What's your price, or what's the dollar amount that you should be negotiating for? Because I've had some where people bring an issue because an outlet was old and needed to be replaced. They're bringing that to the closing conversation at the table. Meanwhile, they're buying a house for, a pretty nice amount of money. And I think that's where having a great agent like Tabitha is worthwhile, is to say, wait a minute, what's worth bringing up? And what do you have to, understand as a homeowner, that you're going to take on this responsibility and this is going to continue for you. And you want to be a good buyer.
Yeah, because it's going to come back to you at some point when you go to sell your property, right? It's going to come back to you. I love the idea of more I wish there was more pre-inspections, because I think that would really help the buyers. This is the price I want to offer based on what we need to fix, and see. I think it would go much smoother if we did more pre-home inspections.
Yeah, Andre, I've got a question for you in this. As we're talking about this, obviously we've got the buyers who can pay for the inspection and do that in the contract to closing period, like we talked about in previous episodes. And then we're talking about these pre-listing inspections where sellers can hire you and kind of preemptively do that. But I'm curious, like, as an inspector and me being a consumer and not in the industry, is there a certain standard of practice that you have to follow, or as you're going to these homes, is there kind of like a rule or a practice or something that you're following that helps you and helps the owner or the seller to kind of understand what it is that you're looking for versus what you're not looking for? Like, is there sort of a baseline to that?
Absolutely. All home inspectors, are trained along that line. I have a standard of practice that I have to follow with Win Home Inspection, the company that I'm with. There's also a standard practice for there's two home inspector associations. There's InterNACHI and there's ASHI. I'm a member of both, and they both have standards of practice that we follow. In addition to that, I'm actually working off of a template. I have a software package that we use. It's a great package, and all of the items that I need to inspect are there. And I really can't turn the report in until I've gone through all the categories and left no stone unturned, or realize, if there's no air conditioner, I can turn it off. But I have to consciously do that. So I have to go through the entire house line by line. And, a lot of times I get into a place like a basement where there's lots of things going on. And so I'm in multiple categories in my report. But absolutely, I have to follow a standard of practice for the home inspection, for sure.
And so in this area, home inspection is, what most of my clients would opt for. We also, a lot of clients would opt for a wood inspection. So can you explain what that entails?
Sure. So many, many home inspectors do not do the wood infesting, the wood destroying insects, bugs, and so on. They would prefer to hire that out to a termite inspector, a pest inspector. I went ahead and got the license, so I'm able to do that inspection. I don't apply or deal with any chemicals. I just simply do the inspections. That involves going through the house and seeing whether there's any visible cases of any wood destroying insects, whether they be termites or carpenter bees or anything along that nature. And they always leave some mark, whether they've drilled through the wood, or you can see the dust, or you see the dead bugs, or you see live bugs, or you see, where they've drilled through. Oftentimes, if it's getting interesting, I'll bring out an infrared camera and I'll be able to see what's going on, because you can't see through anything, but it gives you some insight as to whether or not there's anything going on behind the surface level, knocking on things that look questionable again. If it sounds hollow, maybe there's something going on. So I'm just looking for any evidence of previous wood destroying insects, current destroying insects, whether or not it's been treated, whether or not it's been remodeled and repaired and replaced, all those types of things.
Yeah, so we do that a lot. You know, it's so interesting to me. I've always found this interesting that the VA loans require that. Why do you think, why there and not require a home inspection? What's your opinion on that?
I really don't know. I really don't know. I think it's just historic. I had somebody call me last week and asked if I would do a stand. And usually these ancillary services, whether they be termite or radon, whatever, I usually want to do them as an add-on to the home inspection. I really don't want to go out for just the termite. You know, it's hard. I'll do it as an add-on, but I end up being too expensive just for that. The pest inspector that's local to that community could do it for cheaper. But it's interesting to me that that they asked for that. I had a client call and want me to do a termite inspection on a manufactured home. And I thought, well, it'll be a first because number one, the house is on stilts. It's on posts or it's sitting on cinder blocks, and the distance from the ground to the wood is pretty far, and it's concrete or concrete block. I'm like, what are we doing here? And do you need this for the loan? And they said, no, it's just for peace of mind. I'm like, okay. So
Some people just need peace of mind.
they just need peace of mind. And maybe that's part of what the home inspection does
Right.
for them. You know, like on Saturday, the couple was really happy. Now that one, we did a post-sale inspection. They closed on the house on Friday. I did the inspection on Saturday. But and those are good too, because then they can prioritize what they want to repair and in what order. Because I've
And
talked before.
I'm finding a lot more. I usually find this with my more seasoned buyers, maybe their second or third house. They really want the house. So they're used to walking through the house and seeing sort of the things that might come up, and then they waive the inspection to get the house, and then they call the inspector after to get a post-home inspection. So that also happens. And you know, definitely I don't see that much for the first-time home buyers, but usually 2 or 3 houses in, they're like, you know what, I'll do it after if I really want the house, which
It
is an option.
depends. It really depends. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear on buying the house. I had one client that they bought the house without an inspection, but they have a well and they have a septic system.
Oh, and they didn't do that? See,
No.
that's a no-go.
See, yeah. So, you know, there's certain things that are not.
Yeah. There's certain things for sure. So when I'm representing a buyer, and if there is a septic system or a well, that's a non-negotiable that I tell clients. Like, you have no idea what that septic tank looks like without getting it inspected. Same with the well, and then your water test.
Especially when
Your
we're talking about a
drainage.
house that's 50 years old.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah,
what are
that was risky. That's crazy that they did that.
So what are some common misconceptions like that you run into, Andre, and obviously Tabitha too, like where, you know, I've even as a buyer, like I didn't understand the role of the inspector who was coming through my house, right? And so, or even what to expect with that. And I think some of it is like, I'm not even sure who the inspector works for. Like, is he on my side? Is she on your side? Like it's, you know, so there's some things in there. So it's kind of like you, on some level, you have to remain, but you're also working for whoever the person is that hired you. So how do you kind of balance that? And you touched on it a little bit at the beginning of this, but in your report and in what you're looking for, you know, remaining objective, but still finding the things that you're supposed to be finding.
You said it, Zach. Whoever's paying me is my client, and I don't vary from that. So if the buyer is hiring me, I work for them, and I'm trying to help them make a decision. If the seller hires me to do a pre-listing inspection, I work for them to show them what things they should repair, clean up, remodel, replace, what have you, so that they have the best chance of selling their house without any kind of friction. So that if the buyer comes and says, I still want to have my own home inspection, even on the buy side, they're comfortable saying, go ahead, please, have at it. because we've already done it. There may be also big things that the seller didn't know about that they're able to now disclose, and they may choose not to do the work and just disclose that, the kitchen's old, it needs replacement. And I tell them, why don't you just say that rather than replacing the kitchen? Because whoever's coming in, well, they want their own style and their own colors. They want to make it their own. So as long as it's an open conversation, I think it's better for that side. And so I'm able to navigate depending upon who I'm working with and who I'm trying to coach. So they have the best experience.
Yeah, and then from my standpoint, I have a home buyer's guide I give my clients, and for anything that they're going to need, such as home inspectors, lenders, title insurance companies, and homeowners insurance, I have recommendations. I've been in this industry and I've come up with all these recommendations. And in my book that I give them, I have a list of people for them to call. So they make the decision to call whoever they're going to call based on that, so that they know that they're in charge of the ones hiring the inspection, or whatever they're doing. So I provide some resources to them if they need help. A lot of times my clients do need help finding the resources and want my recommendation. And then they go ahead and for a buyer, they call Andre up himself or whoever it is, and they hire him on their own.
So Tabitha, I know in a previous episode, last episode, you had mentioned in the contract to closing process how the inspections, a lot of times people believe that it could just be pass or fail. And so I'm curious, one, obviously that's a misconception, but since we have both of you on here now, can you talk a little bit to the process of how you walk your client through that inspection report and, sort of Andre's role in that as well?
Andre will provide a report to the buyer, and the buyer will share that report with me. I usually meet on Zoom or we meet in the office, mostly Zoom these days because people schedule. And then we go through the entire report from start to finish. And we go through and we make notes on what things are important, what things we might want to ask for. Again, there's a lot of houses that we're going under contract where the agent and the seller has made it very clear to the agent, go ahead, get your inspection, but I'm not looking to do anything. So don't be coming at me with, so that when I know if that conversation is coming, well, first of all, we could ask for whatever we want because they're accepting an inspection contingency and they can say yes or no, and we can terminate the deal if we're uncomfortable. But I really push to my clients, like, this was the conversation before everyone signed. So if we're gonna agree with a meeting of the minds that, okay, fine, then it's really, again, not the time to go through the entire inspection report with those deals and start asking for things. So I handle it differently depending on if that's the conversation. If that's the conversation, then we're really looking at like big things that we did not know about walking into it, and whether we're going to ask for a credit or ask them to fix it, we talk about that. Now, if no conversation was done and there was a lot of unknowns on the seller's disclosure, that conversation or request might be a little bit more. Again, I think it depends on the buyer and what they have the ability to take on and what they can't. And again, we are walking through the house, we're seeing these things before we're putting the offer in on the house. For me, it's, what are we being told that we did not see and expect, and go from there on what we could potentially ask for. Most offers, we usually have a 10-day period to get inspections done and reply. On competitive offers, sometimes it's a 7-day. So within 7 or 10 days, whatever our contract is written, we have to get the inspections, get the report back, and then put in the reply and wait for the seller's reply.
And really the key there, Tabitha, and the way that you handle it with the clients is really great, because I've worked with agents that they make a mess of things. I mean, my report is in 2 sections. One is the summary up front, which are the things that, need to be repaired or recommended to be repaired that you should be aware of. They're not all the same size. Some are big, some are small. And then there's the rest of the report. And Tabitha's great in going through the report and coaching her clients on what to pay attention to. Sometimes she'll reach back out to me. And again, I'm happy to get on the phone or on that call with you, with the client, and go through it with them line by line as needed. As you said before, Zach, the client often doesn't know what they're looking at or what they're looking for, which questions they should be asking. what things matter. They may be fixated on certain simple things because cracks in drywall or nail pops, and those don't have anything to do with the foundation of the house or the house falling down. So let's not worry about that. What is important, and Tabitha does a great job of keeping the client focused on that and makes the whole deal a lot smoother. You do not want to work with a realtor that makes a mess of the deal because of the home inspection. It's really a useful tool, but you have to just use it as that.
Times, I think I had a client who was looking at this house, old house, probably 100 years old, and we had an inspection, and there was so many things wrong with this house. I mean, it was crazy. The plumbing was really bad, leaks all over, the electrical was bad. The inspector who did that one was like, you need to hire a structural engineer because there was some big signs of issues. And I sat down with a client who really wanted this house. Like they read this report and they still were like, but I had to talk to them knowing what their finances were and knowing that the seller, we had very little wiggle room. I said, we need to stop here because we have to hire a structural engineer. That's going to be another $1,200 or whatever it's going to be. And then what if they tell us, what we probably already know, that it's structurally not good? Then, so how far are we going to go into this? And how much more money are you going to keep spending? There's potential mold. Okay, we have to get a mold test now. Like, how far are we going to go on this house knowing that the sellers, they're not negotiating anymore? And they were heartbroken for a couple weeks. We terminated, but that's knowing your client and knowing the ability of, you want to guide people in the right decision. And for me, I had to guide that client, and this was too much. It was too much for someone to take on.
And on the other side of it, I've done inspections for investors. They know they're buying a house that they're going to have to rehab. It may be an estate sale. It might be a house that's been vacant for 14 years. It could be all kinds of things going on. They know they're bringing a large sum of money, $15,000, $30,000, $50,000 to the table, that they know they're going to sink in because they figured out, whether they use a spreadsheet or just a pencil on the back of an envelope, they know that that's what's going to take. But they still want to know what's the priority, how bad is it, so that their calculations can be as close to accurate as possible. Tabitha, I wanted to ask you, what do you find being the most stressful or frustrating for you as a realtor or for your clients in working with a home inspector?
Because I've worked with several home inspectors, and I would say there was one home inspector that it was really the communication that they had with the client. So they would say everything's great, and then this happened a couple times with the same client because we terminated 3 deals because of home inspections. But they would say it's great, and then they would write the report, and the report just came off very not great. So, which is fine if you're writing the report that way, but I think there has to be communication from the inspector at that point to explain what the issues are. Because when they were written a certain way, it was very scary. And when you have a conversation with the inspector, like I called the inspector the 3rd time it happened, because I was a little confused, because I'm like, we're here at the inspection, there's no problems. And then each time my client gets the report and they want to terminate. So something's going on where they're not understanding the purpose of this home inspection. So really having the inspector set the purpose, the goals to align. I mean, I try to do my best in what I think the expectations should be on that. But at the end of the day, I'm not an inspector. So when you hear certain things out of an inspector's mouth who's qualified to understand the house, if it comes off in a way that's too scary, it's gonna freak out some people. So I think communication with the client, the buyer, is super important so that they understand what they're getting into. We're not trying to force a sale on anybody. At the end of the day, you have to want this home. You have to love this home. This has to be your home. But, you want to make informed decisions, and nothing is going to be imperfect. Nothing is going to be perfect at all. I've done new home inspections that are not perfect. So even a brand new house, over $1 million, is going to have problems. So um, I think it's understanding that and then figuring out if you want to move forward with the house with all the knowledge that you've been given.
I remember getting our inspection report, and this was, I mean, going back, I don't know, a while ago, almost 10 years, I think. But being a first time home buyer and having never gone through the experience before and then getting the inspection report, there was lines on there that like seemed really scary. Like, you know, extensive termite damage in the basement around this area, that area, whatever. It was like all these different things. I'm looking at that, I'm like, holy cow, like I'm in trouble. And it wasn't until the home inspector, thankfully, was the one who actually went through it with us and then was sharing what some of that was, because the real estate agent, you know, was a friend of the family. So it was like, anyway, what I found out later was like, oh well, yeah, it was just a couple of things. It was actually mitigated. The person who was renovating the home like rebuilt the joist or whatever it was, and so like it's like the inspector had to annotate it because he found it and saw it, but it wasn't an issue. Right? It was like, you know, it was some balance in between there, but on the report, it looked scary as all get out.
Right. It does look scary. And like same thing with radon. You know, if people don't understand what radon is found in this area frequently, right? What would you say, Andre, the percentage, do you have like a percentage of people that test the houses that test high for radon lately or
For me, it's probably, 20% of the houses, but it
okay.
depends. It runs through like from Harrisburg through Reading up to Trenton. There's just these layers of it. And it's like the fudge and the fudge ripple ice cream. You can't tell that it's there unless you test, and it all has to do with how well the foundation was built and whether or not it's sealed properly and so on. And there's things that builders do now to do their best to mitigate that, but you also need to understand what that is. It's easy for a lot of groups to scare people, and I don't sell fear. The EPA recommended number is 4.0 picocuries per liter of radon, but it's a very fast decaying gas that comes from the ground. Well, let's say you're at 3 or 4. Should we mitigate? I've had people that was the reading came in at 2.5 and she's all afraid and she has to
Oh, yeah.
mitigate. And I said, hold on, let's think for a minute. Are you going to finish
Right.
this basement? No. You going to spend any time here besides coming down to the pantry and picking up a can of tomatoes? No. I'm like, by the time it gets to the first floor, it's no longer an issue. Why are we getting excited about it? If you have really high numbers, it can be mitigated. I don't do any of the installs, but it can be taken care of. But there's no reason to scare people about.
And some
Hey,
people just hear that and they're like, okay, I like this is too much. And the reality is most times when I've had radon test high, the seller gets a radon mitigation system. It's usually on like I had one seller that was like, I don't care. I don't, and didn't, but all the others were like, sure, I'll put in a radon mitigation system, which costs $13, $15, $1,700
yeah,
for them to put it in. It's not a huge deal, but it's like educating the clients to not be totally scared when they see a radon level go high. Or a lot of the homes in Mount Airy in this area have some asbestos in it, right? So where is the asbestos? Do we need to remove it? How would we remove it? But sometimes people just hear asbestos and like freak out when probably I would think the majority of a lot of the homes in that area have
of course they do.
asbestos.
And there's asbestos was a fantastic material. The problem was that when you worked with it, it would flake off and then you would breathe those fumes. But if it's where it is and nobody touches it, it's not really an issue. It's an issue when you start to mess around
To
with it.
move it. So then you have to have that conversation about what your
Right.
plan is. And if your plan is to remove it, then yeah, there's got to be precautions and
Professional
things
with
like that.
PPE and they know what they're doing. And but otherwise, it's not. I've got asbestos siding, which is fantastic stuff from the 40s, and as long as it's
I had one
there,
house with that. Yeah, you still have that at your house?
not at my house, no, but I see houses with that, and as long as it's
Yeah.
on the wall,
Yeah.
but if it
Yeah.
breaks, you're not going to be able to fix it or replace it because you
No.
can't
And you
get it
don't want to be
anymore.
breathing it in.
Yeah, but you're already outside, and so, it's just what do you want to get excited about? Same thing with termites. It's like, how much damage are we talking about? You can replace, repair, you can treat, you can do all the things to take care of it. I mean, If it's really bad, well, then we need to talk about it. But if it's just one little place, it could be fixed. Most things in homes can be fixed. Now, if the foundation has completely cracked and one corner has sunk 2 inches and there's water coming in and there's all, well, now we have to have a conversation, okay? But most other things can be repaired. The question that it's what Tabitha said before. Do you have the stomach and the finances, and is that a project you want to do? I had an investor buy a place in Germantown, and then they were selling it. I was working with an investor who was going to buy it from them. It was clear this lady wanted to buy this house, live in with her parents, and repair it as she went. Well, it got the best of her. It got way ahead of her, and she had to get out. But even the investor that wanted to come in took a look at it, and he paid me a really good amount for my fee for the inspection. He ended up terminating it. He said, but that was the best fee he ever spent because
Right.
he knew, looking at it after working with me, even though he wanted to buy an investment property and rehab it and so on, that was too much to start with.
Yeah. And I think too, for the seller side too, when we're negotiating sellers, sometimes they don't know options. And here's the thing, if there's something majorly wrong with their house, once they hear about it, they have to disclose it, or they legally should, and so should the agent. So if we give them the inspection report, we terminate it, now they understand the issue of their house, they have to disclose that. So most likely they're either going to take a big reduction on their price, or they're going to have to fix it with somebody else. So I always tell sellers, like, maybe they don't have the money. Maybe they do not have the money to do what's needed in the house right now, which is understandable. There's creative ways around that. We've put money in escrow at closing. So we've gotten quotes on what it is to fix it. At the closing table, money gets put aside at a title company. It's held for the repair. So that way they don't have to put money out, that they might not have. So that's an option. Some contractors have been kind enough to take payment at the settlement table. There are few that do that, but I do have some that do that. So there's options to really help the seller if need be, because the reality is the worst thing to do is put your house back on the market based on a bad inspection, because you're going to take a hit regardless. So if you have a buyer that's willing to buy it, you try to negotiate with them.
Right now, I've got a lot of estate sale inspections, and there is no money for the repairs. There is no money for that. The family just, needs to unload the property for a reasonable amount, and the buyer needs to understand what they're getting themselves involved with, because as people get older and they're dealing with their health issues, they're not keeping their house up. They're just not. It's
So
just what it
in
is.
in today's market, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster, I would imagine. And so we talked a little bit about this throughout the course of this episode, but I think it's important to kind of bring it to a head here, in that in today's market, does it make sense for a seller to be doing these pre-listing inspections as opposed to waiting for the surprise at the end when the buyer goes through it? I mean, is that really something that we should be paying more attention to as consumers, to, when we're thinking about listing our homes now, as, things are starting to change?
I think it depends on the market still. Again, I service the suburbs and not. So obviously in a market where, I went to a house with a buyer, I was going to write an offer, and they already had 3 offers on the first day. And so for that seller, did they really need to do a pre-home inspection? No. And they probably got it waived. And having one of those inspections, then again, you have to disclose, it probably wouldn't have made sense in that market, which is a suburb of Philly. Though some Philly, where there's a lot of inventory, things are sitting, maybe more first-time home buyers that are not going to waive, those might make sense to do it. Same thing with Delaware County. I feel like lately a lot of my first-time home buyers are tending to go to Delaware County for some affordable housing. So those areas, I'm seeing a lot more home inspections, a lot more problems potentially, a lot more older homes that haven't been maintained properly. So maybe, if their house is sitting on the market, maybe that would have helped a buyer to make a move on it.
It depends.
But
It's so situationally dependent.
yeah,
Every single deal is its own thing. I mean, I've done some pre-listing inspections. The people have lived in the house for 40 years, okay? And they've kept it up. The house was beautiful, but some of the things were DIY, some things were done by, a friend of the family, and some things weren't quite right, and other things, that, and so they just wanted to know and clean it up, but they were open to that idea. In many cases, the seller is not in a position to do any of that. It's just going to be what it is. And so, it's a utopian thought that everybody would get a pre-listing inspection. I think for those where it makes sense, it's great. I mean, it's the same thing on the buyer side. Sometimes you
hmm
don't need an inspection. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense, but I always find something, even doing very expensive homes, north of $2 million,
there's
found some
always
big issues
something.
that they would have known about. Now, again, it's a question of scale, right? If you're buying a house for, you know, $300,000 and getting a new roof or a new HVAC system, it's a fair amount of money, okay? But when you're buying a $2.5 million house and you have to buy, one of the four HVAC systems, and it's not really that much money to them, right? Not that anybody wants to spend money that they don't necessarily have to, but it's a question of, and the conversation is different, and Tabitha will tell you that. The conversation is different whether they're first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers aren't always kids, okay? They may be
No, the average age is now 38 years old.
38. I've got people that are getting divorced at 65, and for them, well, one of them at least, it's a first-time home buy, okay? So they're scared. So it's all over the map with this, how do you make the person comfortable with the purchase of their home? They're taking a mortgage, potentially. They're taking on responsibility, which they may have never had. I've had people in their 70s who always rented and are now buying a house, and want to make it clear to them, you understand you're buying a responsibility. Okay.
Yeah, you'll always have something that needs to be fixed. So can you do it? Can you afford to do it without going bankrupt, right? Or without, because, and I always warn people that, like, if this roof is done, if this is on its last leg, do you have money in a year from now or 6 months from now to replace that roof? If the answer is no, it's time to terminate the deal. Or I mean, we can ask for it, but if they don't give it and the answer is no, then we should not be gambling with the finances that way and
Right.
just
And I've
fingers
met many
crossed.
people over the years where they waive their inspection and then they buy their house in the spring and the air conditioner quits in June, but they stretched to buy the house. They stretched their budget, they stretched their, how much they could borrow. There's no equity in the home, there's no money, and now they come up with a $10,000 or $15,000 bill for air conditioner, and they want to go back to the bank for more money. There is no more money that they can borrow because they maxed out. And so it's exactly what Tabitha said. I mean, you've got to prepare for the fact that, I do a lot of commercial inspections too. And in commercial inspections, it's a different conversation because you know that you have to save a certain amount of money for capital expenditure. Because I'm telling you that the air conditioner needs to be replaced every 20, 25 years. A roof on a residential house needs to be replaced maybe every 20, 25 years. Windows every 20, 25 years. Water heater every 8 to 12 years. You're going to be buying one. So are you putting enough money away? Let's say it was $1,000 a month, because that bill will come.
Yeah, it will come.
It will come.
Now, going back to your question on home inspections that I think people should get pre-listing, stucco. I always think a stucco houses, it's always the first thing people go in and go, is this stucco bad? So I always say stucco inspection. I would recommend all sellers to get an inspection, and pool inspections. Because, for instance, I just looked at a house, the pool's closed now, we can't see it. So if you're going to list your house, especially in the fall, the winter, you might want to have someone before you cover it do a pool inspection. So that way the buyer knows what the pool condition is.
Anymore, I'm finding most people don't. There are some, but most people have moved over to having a professional pool company open and close their pool. And so that's a good thing. So if they can show you a receipt, you're buying the house in November, they closed it in in September, you can say, listen, we had this checked out by this professional company. Here's the receipt. That always goes a long way. Stucco, I agree with you. Stucco, if you maintain stucco and it was installed correctly, it should last a long time. But again, most people do not take care of painting it properly. And then most of the time, we find either the windows were not installed correctly or the gutters weren't installed correctly. And so you put those three together, and it's a potentially expensive issue.
So as a home buyer, right, I'm 10 years in my home now, and I don't plan on moving out in the next 5 years probably or so. But what can I do to be proactive in maintaining some of these areas of my home so that, if I do try to sell in 5 years, I'm not just like, oh, now I've got all these huge inspections. Or these huge bills? Like, do you say maybe I should get an inspection every 10 years? Or like, is there something that I should do to kind of be proactive in that process?
So I have a sheet that I'm happy to share with everybody. Every quarter, it's a list of about 10 or 12 things that you need to do every quarter in your house. Okay? Whether you want to do them yourself or you want to hire a professional come out and do it, whether you want to have an annual contract with people. But these are the things you need to check in this fall, spring, winter, summer, so that you're not trapped. You're not caught with something that you didn't notice. If you keep looking at things and learning how to look at them, then you will see when they change for the worse. And then you'll also know when it's time to just repair it, because the longer you wait, it's just going to get more expensive. Okay? It's no different than your car. Okay? It starts making noise, it's trying to tell you something. So if you're able to walk around your house once a quarter and identify and notice these things and have certain repair maintenance things done on a regular basis, then many of the things in the house could last a long time, but you'll be ahead of the curve in knowing when you need to call a professional, what things you can do yourself, and like that. So yeah, I have a checklist. There's a ton of them out there on what to do quarterly to your house so that you're not caught.
Yeah, share your checklist. That'll
We'll
be
make it
good for
available
us,
for
right? We
everybody.
can
We'll
add that to a link because that would be good
provide
to
a link.
have. And and keep receipts of everything. Everything you do, you keep. I mean, I have some sellers they have a nice binder, everything's in, but that's very helpful for buyers. When they walk through and they see that, they're like, wow, and so keep all your receipts and your invoices. A lot of buyers like seeing that.
Yeah.
So we're kind of wrapping up here to the end of this episode, and I feel like we've covered a lot of really great information. But I'd be interested in, Andre, your opinion as far as what are kind of some of the most important things that the listener can walk away with today that they should keep in their mind when dealing with inspections and going through that process?
You're saying from whether the buyer what should they know about an inspection? I think they should ask a lot of questions. I think if they can attend the inspection, they should. I think they need to work with a realtor that will understand and listen to them as to whether, and considering the houses that they're looking at, as to whether or not an inspection makes sense for them. I mean, I was always told that every house needs an inspection. That's not the case. Sometimes you do, but I think the buyers need to be aware of what they're getting into, and so that they can make an informed decision. What you don't, I think the most important thing is you want to work with a realtor that does not sell fear, or work with an inspector that you don't need the fear. What you need is information and coaching and guidance so that you can sit back comfortably and decide whether or not this is the right house for you, and whether or not you have the wherewithal and the finances and the skill, or do you want to learn? So you have to take a good inventory of yourself as a home buyer. I think that's the important part. Are you willing to do stuff yourself? Are you willing to hire it out? I'm always available to talk to buyers. I mean, I have buyers calling me all the time and asking me questions, and many times I don't book an inspection out of it, but I'm happy to help them so that they can go on and do the right thing for themselves. It's not scary to get an inspection as long as you use it correctly, and the right realtor knows that too. There are clients out there that want to use the inspection to beat up the seller or something, or they're using it as leverage to get out of the deal. They weren't interested in it in the first place. I don't think that that's really the right way to operate. I think you need to operate professionally, whether you're the buyer or the seller, and all the parties win, because if you don't, it's going to come back to you.
Yeah, Tabitha, anything you would add to that, just from your
No, I
perspective?
think that was a perfect sum. I mean, inspections shouldn't be fearful. They should be able to give you knowledge whether or not you want to move forward or not move forward. And again, I agree with everything you said. It's transparency to me. It's this is what I signed up for potentially. But yeah, you don't I don't think it's fair to really use it to, try to get the house for the price you really want it originally. And usually I can notice that right away, that that's the avenue we're going. Well, we're going to that price that you originally wanted to offer, and then you decided to offer more, and now we want to get back to that price. So I just think, for everybody's time, it's everybody has valuable time spent to find your home. So for respect of everybody's time, it's, if you want the house, let's look at the inspection with big eyes and see if this is the house for me. And if it's not, it's okay. Terminating is fine, but terminating for the right reason is fine.
Yeah. The other thing, I think that, Tabitha, you know better than I do, on the agreement of sale, there's 3 inspections you can ask for. I think you can ask for the home inspection, the termite, and the radon is on there, but there are other things that would be valuable for people. One of the big ones, more than ever, is mold. You can't always see it. It could be behind things, but in many places a mold test makes sense, whether it be a surface test or an air test. Again, those are important. And moisture is a big thing. You can't always see it. I've got tools, whether it be an infrared camera or different types of moisture meters that we can bring to see whether or not moisture is an issue, because it's always an indicator of something bigger. And I've had a lot of clients that they just want to do the home inspection just to say they got a home inspection. They call up and they're shopping for the best price, and they just want to get it done to check off that they got a home inspection. That's not really the best attitude. The best attitude is, how much can I learn about this house and everything that's gone on, what the story is of how it got to where it is now, with somebody that I can trust, so that I know what I'm getting myself involved with. It's not just check off, I got a home inspection. You want to know what you're getting into.
Yep, agreed.
Well, Andre, great conversation. Thanks so much for joining us today. A lot of helpful information there, and I'm sure a lot of people will walk away with a better understanding of what really goes into an inspection and what they should be.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Thanks, Tabitha. It is always a pleasure.
And share that list with us.
I'm going to send it over to you now. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And thank all of you for joining us yet again for another episode of Keeping Tabs. And so as we head into this Thanksgiving season, it's a great reminder that our home is more than just a place where we live. It's where we gather, we laugh, we make memories. And so a good inspection will help to protect that, give you peace of mind in knowing that the place that you call home is safe and sound and ready for all those memories. So if you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who you think who is thinking about buying or selling. So if you're ready to take that next step, or if you're interested in scheduling a consultation, you can do so with Tabitha here at tabithaheight.com, or also with Andre if you're interested in those inspections that we talked about today. Thanks again for listening, and have a happy and heart-filled Thanksgiving.